Please welcome Jason Carter. Thank you.
Thank you. So I apologize to everybody. When we did these bios, we were thinking that they'd be printed out and you could just read them. So we're going to talk about fostering innovation within water utilities. I know a number of you, Wendy, Colin, Matt, a number of you were involved in this project. Jeff, show of hands. Who all? I think I might have gotten everybody. This is a fantastic, I want to thank each and every one of you for your engagement on this. This has been fantastic, the Water Research Foundation project that we had been working on since 2015 and just recently wrapped up. We're going to go through, there's a lot to it. We're going to focus, as Bob had requested, on a few pieces of it, but definitely encourage you, if you haven't been through it, to go through that. You can download the report as well as case studies. So I want to thank you for taking time out this morning and giving me a chance to chat a little bit about the develop and resource allocation aspect. But I'm going to stop talking here, and I'm actually going to give you guys the opportunity to see the very freshest product out of the Water Research Foundation project. And quite frankly, I'm going to let it do the talking for us.
The world of water utilities is changing. Costs are increasing. Revenue is generally flat or declining. Why is this happening? Water supply variability, aging infrastructure, increasing regulation. As a result, utilities of all sizes around the world are rethinking what it means to be a utility. These reimagined organizations are seeking new ways to provide value to their customers. In fact, in a global survey of more than 420 water utility employees, over 90% believe that innovation is critical to the future success of their organization. So they believe it, but how can they achieve it? The answer? They've embraced innovation as a business practice. But being innovative is not easy. There's no guarantee of success, and new ideas and outcome uncertainty can feel threatening to mature organizations. No guarantee of success. But when utilities embrace a culture of innovation, the benefits are limitless and the outcomes are exceptional. To help realize these benefits, Water Research Foundation and Water Environment and Reuse Foundation launched a project in partnership with the commercial sector and 50 utilities from around the world to build a simple framework. This framework consists of 8 disciplines for fostering innovation, and they're based on 3 simple elements. Number 1, impact, aligning innovation with utility priorities. Number 2, capability, creating an environment that nurtures new ideas. Number 3, engagement, involving a wide array of stakeholders. Using this framework, utilities can better assess their current innovation environment, effectively develop an innovation strategy, use the strategy to launch a program while avoiding common mistakes, and measure progress toward utility goals. Embracing innovation can transform utilities of any size into more agile organizations. And as an added bonus, innovative utilities can be better positioned to attract and retain top talent in today's competitive job market. Interested in learning more about transforming your utility? Discover more resources for fostering innovation within utilities by visiting waterrf.org or werf.org.
Great. So obviously this is a little communication piece that is not targeted toward a technical audience, and it's the best I could do on the plane here. So thank you very much for humoring my artistic ability. I don't know, thumbs up, thumbs down for use within your organization, with the public. Okay, that was risky. Thank you very much for the, yeah. So this is a fantastic project. We did work with 50 utilities around the world. Got a lot of great perspectives, developed some case studies, all available for download. But the major pieces of this really resolve down to a couple of different things, and we're going to focus on those moving forward. Number 1, the Utility Innovation Framework. You heard a little bit about the 3 elements of the utility framework, but they're built on 8 different disciplines. So there's 8 different pie pieces here, and the discipline a discipline is a practice that molds or develops character, right? That affects, when we'll use the other word that we're going to stay clear of most of the rest of the day, culture. But it is going to, these practices or behaviors are things that affect and mold the decisions that individuals make on a day-to-day basis. As all told, and as a sum, that will affect really your overall culture within your organization. So what we did, we were looking for these disciplines, these critical disciplines that are well known outside of our industry. These are things that are practiced in the private sector and have been for many decades. And we selected 8 that we thought would work for us. Those 8 are: visualize, to maintain a long view that empowers and inspires innovation. Focus, defining challenges, the priorities really for your organization that'll guide your investment. Develop, and this is the one we're going to spend the most time on, investing resources in new ideas. Evaluate, this is testing those concepts and scaled and relevant applications. Engage, motivate, enable, and reward stakeholders. Reach, so this is utilizing resources outside your organization. 7 is communicate, capture and convey, defining success stories, not successes, success stories. Stories are what really changes behavior, right? Another topic for another day, right? And evolve, the last one, actually having impact and changing as an organization as a result of innovation. All right, so I'm going to quiz everybody during the break, so I hope everybody's got that, right? But no, it's all available obviously in the report. So using this, we were able to, this framework, the Utility Innovation Framework, and these 8 key business disciplines, we're able to send out a number of different surveys as part of the project. One was looking at how well organizations are embracing these behaviors. The second one was about innovation catalysts and inhibitors. What types of barriers are the utilities running into when they're trying to implement new things? We also delved into the details of actual innovation programs that a number of utilities have been running for decades. And then the last one had to do with specific innovative ideas, the urgency and priority for the overall organization, for the industry. Well, we had sent out surveys to a number of folks, but we had 82 utilities respond, over 420 water professionals. 31 of those utilities actually had an innovation program from which we developed a knowledge base. How are they doing things? Now, each one was kind of doing things on their own, so there wasn't a one-size-fits-all. So what we're going to do is really delve into the results from these surveys and hope to learn a little bit from the experience of these organizations. So what you have here, so how many engineers we have in the room? So you guys are going to get your quota of graphs from me today. And we're going to scoot through them pretty quickly because we've got a lot to cover today. But what you see here is along the x-axis are the 8 key business disciplines, from visualize to evolve. And on the y-axis, it's the number of utilities, or the percent of utilities that say that they effectively embrace those behaviors. And you see that none of them rated over 50%, right? And in fact, there's a couple that are particularly low. Engage, right? So this is engaging your stakeholders. For those who don't have instant recall of what that was, this is enabling, rewarding, empowering your staff, as well as your customers and others that are associated with your organization. And focus is the other one, really saying no to certain things and yes to the things that are most important, providing priorities, really directing those investments. But again, we're going to focus on development, which is resource allocation. So what we had done in this survey, we had a series of about 18 questions, each mapped to a different discipline. The develop questions really focused on, are you providing funding to your staff, to your organization? Are you providing time, bandwidth for your team, for your staff to actually try new things? Are you giving them training and to understand how you take things from a concept level, the seed of this incomplete idea, to something that can actually be tested and implemented? Do you have infrastructure that more than your engineering department gets to play with, or operations team gets to play with, right? Are you providing those assets and making them available to staff? Interestingly enough, develop was the 3rd highest of these disciplines, but obviously keep in mind 43% is not great, right? So there's obvious room for growth. So, okay, so we're doing this, and there are some utilities that are doing it, right? But is this a problem, right? So I guess the one way, so I've got a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I've learned, I don't know how to do sheetrock, but I do know how to get the truth. And my daughter is a master. She's going to be an attorney, I'm sure. But at any rate, it's asking the question multiple different ways. That's the way you triangulate on kids until they figure that out. So what we did is we asked questions about how well are you doing here, and then we asked, as far as an inhibitor, where do resources rank? Is it really a problem for organizations trying to implement innovation? And so we have here our top 5 internal inhibitors to innovation. Number 1, culture. At 54% of the respondents saying that is the number 1. We had followed by the lack of resources, so that was number 2. 3 was the lack of a process for taking an idea from this concept to implementation. 3rd is lack of a really key motivating driver for innovation. I'm comfortable, at least I'm not in dire pain. I'm just mildly uncomfortable, maybe I could say it that way. Being complacent. Bob talked about not having enough of a motivation to get over that fear of loss, right? Which is then you get to the last one, which was perceived risk. So here we definitely have resources rating as number 2. Then we looked at external inhibitors. So we were looking at things that are happening outside our organizations that are affecting our ability to innovate. These are the top 10, ranging from infrastructure rehab and replacement needs down to workforce level education. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, but I just want to point out really one thing. At least 5 of these have to do with limiting resources or directing those resources. Basically earmarking every dollar that comes in having to go to infrastructure rehab or replacement, or having to go to water scarcity, water supply, things along those lines. So definitely what we learned here is that resources are a key need. Even though it's something that we tend to do well, relatively speaking, across those disciplines, it is a key ingredient to making innovation happen. So then we looked at the innovation programs. This might be just a little small for you to read, but we looked at those 31 programs that did have a process for taking ideas from, again, concept to implementation. They generally broke down into 2 different types of innovation programs. One's a formal program, which generally has an identified innovation leader. They have specified goals. Many times they have innovation strategies. They sometimes have line item budgets. Then to the informal. We had more informal programs than we had formal. Informal are more, if an idea comes up, we'll be supportive of it, but we're not really driving innovation. Don't necessarily have an innovation leader that's responsible for the day-to-day feeding and carrying of ideas. So what you see here is you generally get, and it's not surprisingly so, the smaller organizations are able to generally have the informal programs. And as you move into along the x-axis are operating budgets ranging from less than $100 million all the way to your right, to over 500 million. And so you see that an increase in the formal programs as you get larger, not super surprising. But one of the key things that we saw that was interesting from a funding or resourcing standpoint was the stark difference in the level of investment. So for those of you that you are data geeks, here's your box and whisker plot. So what we saw is that programs, and that came out really tiny, the formal programs generally, or on average, invested 1.39%, okay? They range from about 0.4% up to over 3.1% of their operating budgets into innovation. So as a range, so less than 0.5%, over 3%, with an average of 1.39% for those folks that had formal. Those that had informal programs range from about 0.02% to 0.6%, with an average of 0.16. Not a lot of money, right? And I think that one of the things that it certainly speaks to is that you don't have an articulated driving goal that you're trying to achieve here with the informal programs. It's just generally supportive overall. So just take that file that away. We're going to continue on motoring through here. Other things that these innovation programs invested in. Site visits. Over 97% sent their folks off to see new technologies and new practices. 93% allowed them time. External partners, 66% of utilities engaged external partners in their innovation activities. And 47% said they actually had physical space for folks to test and evaluate things. A couple of other percentages just for the, just for the joy of it. 71% of utilities actually funded something, put some money into innovation. However, less than 60% had a budget, 40% had developed business cases, 33% actually had a selection process. So what does all this mean? We're spending money without a whole lot of direction. Okay, so innovation is happening, but while innovation is getting funded and resourced in some of these organizations, but without a whole lot of guide rails, right? So there's certainly a risk there. Another thing that we're going to scoot through really quickly, all I want you to see here, this is a really busy graph, is there's a lot of money. This represents about $50 million worth of innovation spending from these utilities that were participating. This is in 1 year. You see that you've got I don't know if it'll show up, it's not showing up, but over to your left, you've got the smaller programs. They've got the smaller catalyst level funding. I say the 25,000 to 100,000. Toward the middle, you start getting bigger circles. These are the bigger, I guess, more endowed programs. You get to 3 million, and then you get to the big programs that have a range of investments, anywhere from a couple, say, $10,000, $25,000 up to $14 million spent in a given year. So the question is, there's a lot of money being spent. Does it really matter from a standpoint of how important is it? Yes, it's an inhibitor. We know that earlier, but is this a prime indicator of success for innovation? And so we plotted that out. We looked at utilities along the x-axis. Is innovation critical to their future? So those utilities that said yes are to the far right. Those that achieved innovation are all the way to the top, so that's on your Y. So you'd think that a lot of the big money would be spent in the upper right-hand quadrant, and we found that it's not. There are utilities spending a lot of money that aren't achieving the goals that they had for creating an innovative culture, which goes back to what we were saying earlier. There's money being spent without a whole lot of guidance and focus. Right? All right, moving on. So some of these utilities are broadening their perspectives. It's not just all about money. So they're really looking at defining the resources more broadly, access to their assets, experience, the creativity of their people. We have, in utilities, you have a uniquely broad skill set, a body of folks that come from a lot of different directions and experiences and whatnot. Engaging them on these projects actually is of value, or on innovative activities are of value. Coaching and creativity. Also redefining the stakeholders. It's both inside and it's beyond your planning and engineering departments. It's folks throughout your organization, as well as those folks from the regulatory community, the research community, suppliers. This is your network, right? Your supply chain. Understanding that each one of these folks bring to you a resource profile. It might be they have resources that you don't, but collectively, together, you can create this collective investment and resourcing approach for innovative ideas that you have. It's not all about you having the money, right? They're also broadening perspectives on the return. So broadening perspectives on resources and on return. It's not necessarily just financial impact, but you're looking at sustainability. We have utilities that are achieving their goals with sustainability. Better solutions. These are right-sized solutions for them. Organizational health and morale. Recognition. We're going to hear a lot about this stuff with the case studies later today. And community engagement. Some utilities are effectively using their innovation programs to engage their customers. All right, so a real quick snapshot of some details here, some examples. So utilities are providing things like catalyst investments, and these things look like memberships. They look like conference attendance, getting their people out. It looks like sending them off to another utility or going to visit an expert at a university. They are establishing catalyst or idea funds. Does anybody have, these are small discretionary funds that you're able to just allow, or invest in manufacturing or development of an idea. So we've got 2, 3, okay, a handful, yeah, excellent. That is absolutely critical, right? Having the ability to have just a little bit, it doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit of money to get things moving is absolutely critical, right? So then you get into initiative research budgets. So leadership looks at things that are the key challenges for the utility for that year and the upcoming years, and set aside these budgets within or line items for those initiatives. And then you have in-project innovation or investments that utilities are making. So we have a lot of capital, right? Projects, given that we're asset-rich organizations and we're responsible for those. It's thinking about what ways in projects that are already in our portfolios can we provide space for innovation? Can we provide space for testing new technologies and new approaches? There's collaboration. Utilities, we're talking about the peer network. Certainly Jeff is going to talk about LIFT, the Water Research Foundation, really powerful opportunity to leverage the collective ability of the utilities in the room here and beyond. Research centers, members of NSF Research Center. I know Jeff, Jordy, I don't know if you're a member of the NSERC, but there's the things, there's the universities in Canada and in the United States provide a great opportunity to tap into university experts at professors at multiple universities and have assets for you to, again, leverage. Co-op programs. There's a number of utilities, Southern Nevada Water Authority, Birmingham Water. I'm sure there's a number of folks in the room that can tell stories about postdocs that they have working within their organization that are doing, you can call them fellowships or whatnot, but they cycle through, bring new ideas in and rotate out. Maybe they might eventually or at some point become an employee, maybe not. But effectively using a partnership with universities to bring in new ideas and, again, leverage the university infrastructure. Partnerships with entrepreneurs. Broadening the concept, we've talked a little bit about that. One thing I want to mention at the bottom is intellectual property. One of the things we shouldn't be afraid to talk about is IP, okay? Because you can miss out on opportunity. You can actually end up paying more by not being IP smart, okay? So you can help develop something and then be charged full price on down the road and be locked into a technology, okay? So having and being aware of and having a strategy, rules of engagement for intellectual property is an important thing to think about. All right. So some takeaways. These are some lessons learned that having multiple workshops where we had all these innovation leaders in the room, they shared some lessons learned along the way that I just wanted to share with you today. Number one, step one, get leadership endorsement, right? Got to have endorsement from the top. Set expectations and priorities. Expectations about what your innovation program can do and what the priorities are. And expectations on your end as to what kind of investment you're going to get from your organization. Understand the ground rules. There's certain words you can't use in organizations. One was research for some utilities that I worked with. Another one was innovation. That was synonymous with gambling in some folks' mind. It's amazing to me. But the other thing we heard is never waste an emergency, right? There are emergencies. If you're looking for something that's going to get the political will, that's going to get organizational will aligned behind making stuff happen, it's going to be those emergencies, right? Might not be number one on your list, but it could be 2 or 3, and but don't be ruled by it. That's the other piece. Is don't chase these emergencies. Make sure that you're thinking long term about those things that are beneficial to your organization. I'm not going to go into this in a great detail, but there's one way to set expectations. In one of the handouts, I believe we have maturity levels. And this is explained in the document, in the guidance manual. Again, one size does not fit all, and you can establish your own maturity level for your organization. It's the level of investment you want to make, whether it's supportive and kind of passive support. There's an effective way to do that. There's a way to really actively engage and drive innovation and how you fund that. There's a strategy for that. And then ultimately there's a way to network and develop collaborative programs where you can leverage resources outside. Again, I won't go into great detail here, just know that there are some resources available to you to allow you to scale expectations to your organization. All right, so number 2 is to set a selection criteria, focus. So use those priorities to really say no to things, right? Say no to the things that are not on your list, right? Don't be afraid of doing that. Rethink resourcing. It's not all about the money. You have a lot of in-kind capability. You have assets that people would love to be able to test things on. You don't need to pay them to do that, right? Consider tier funding, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Revisit and review investments. Don't fear the breakup, right? Don't throw good money after bad. One real quick, this looks a little complicated, but I promise it's not that hard to absorb here. So this is a plot that takes an idea from the left all the way to the right as it develops and matures. It takes increasing amounts of resourcing as you take it from this small idea that you might be able to fund and get off the ground with your catalyst funding to then possibly you can create some stage demonstration funds, right? And revisiting that idea as it develops. Is it still going to achieve the types of goals that you want it to achieve? Ultimately, you got to cut them off. Matthew McConaughey. No failure to launch. You got to kick them out of the basement at some point. You get to a point where they earn their own keep, or you continue to develop it. There's some ideas that phase two is even more powerful than phase one of the idea. It's important to recognize those things. But the takeaway here, just think about baby steps and revisiting the process or the progress the idea is making. This is 3 of 4 things that I'll give you here. So leverage your existing network. You have relationships with a lot of different organizations. Make sure you know who they are, what their value position is, what yours is, what you have to offer, and how that connection can happen. Partnerships must be mutually beneficial. You don't have to be paying everybody to come and bring these new ideas to you. Okay? And we talked a little bit about this. Everybody's got their own resource profile, a value profile. Fourth and final, invest through implementation. Don't think your catalyst fund is it, okay? So think about resources from the early on idea all the way through implementation. And be committed. Don't give up on an idea too early. There's a lot of ideas that get to the point where there's maybe a compelling business case or maybe even a prototype or you bench scaled it or something along those lines, and it just ends up being a cool idea that you looked into at one point but wasn't fully implemented. Adoption is a very tough thing to drive in organizations. So make sure you're in it for the long haul if it continues to make sense as you revisit it. And then lastly, make sure you have smart metrics. It doesn't have to be just financial metrics, but innovation should and it must provide a return, okay? And there are a number of different metrics that are available for you, and if you want these, we can certainly provide those later.